Your boy caused this entire mess.
Get out of here!
The footage proves your deliberate lie.
She shoved the violation notice against my chest so hard the paper bent. My son was still on the ground, knees scraped, breath shaking, and Brielle Kavanaugh didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on me, sharp, cold, calculating. "Your boy obstructed a designated travel lane," she said, voice clipped like she'd rehearsed every syllable. I didn't answer. I just stared at the yellow lane marker beneath his palms, the one that always faded faster than the HOA claimed, and felt something inside me twist hard. If you've ever felt the exact moment a parent stops being afraid and starts becoming unbreakable, stay with me and hit subscribe now. Because what she didn't know, not yet, was that she wasn't the only one who understood what digital evidence could do. And she sure as hell didn't know the truth about the footage she was banking her entire accusation on. She expected me to fold. Instead, I said quietly, "You're filing this based on camera pull times you didn't authenticate." Her grip on the paper stiffened. A tiny shift, but I caught it. "My name's Rowan," I said, steadying my voice as my son tried to stand. "I've spent years auditing federal data streams. If someone alters digital evidence, I see it faster than most people breathe." I wasn't bragging. I was warning her. And for a heartbeat, the clipboard queen lost her perfect posture before snapping it back into place. None of this was about a bike. It was about my kid, my 8-year-old who had been working for months on his balance issues. His therapist had told us every fall mattered. Every impact left a mark most people never saw. And today, he'd been hit full speed by a teenager twice his size, while the board chair scolded him for scratching the paint on a community lane. It felt like someone had ripped the air out of my lungs. The tyrant in heels crouched toward my son with a tone that made my stomach clench. "Next time, you stay out of active lanes. Children must maintain awareness." She said it like he'd done something criminal, like the collision hadn't launched him sideways. I stepped between them. "Back up." She lifted an eyebrow, unbothered. The enforcer in crimson always believed she owned whatever space she occupied. My boy clung to my pant leg, still trembling. That was the final blow. The emotional snap that turned this from an argument into a war I hadn't asked for, but couldn't walk away from. The officer of rules didn't understand that. For families like mine, these weren't bureaucratic notes. These were injuries, real ones, ones that changed routines, sleep schedules, therapy hours, and insurance forms. This wasn't a citation. It was a wound. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like that made her threats more legitimate. "Sign the incident acknowledgement, Rowan. Non-compliance triggers fines." The clipboard queen didn't realize she'd already lost control, because Elise, my wife, was jogging down the driveway with her work badge still clipped on. And if there was anyone who could dismantle a lie, it was the Federal Analyst who built truth from corrupted data sets. "Don't sign anything," she said to me, not even glancing at Brielle Kavanaugh. "I saw the footage in the HOA portal. It's missing 3 frames. The board chair froze. I watched color drain from her face, watched her realize this wasn't going to be another easy intimidation win. Not this time. Not with us. Not with what she'd tried to bury. And in that moment, standing beside my shaking son and the woman who'd spent her career exposing the unseen, I knew something with absolute clarity. This fight had just begun. Elise's words hung in the air like a dropped match in a dry forest. 3 missing frames. Not corrupted, missing. I felt my son lean into me as the truth settled in. But Brielle Kavanaugh reacted first. Her lips parted, then closed again, like she couldn't decide whether to deny it or attack. The board chair wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in front of residents. "We'll review the footage internally," she said, posture rigid, voice tightening around each syllable. Elise didn't blink. It was already reviewed. By who, exactly? The clipboard queen shifted her weight, glancing toward the row of connected townhomes, as if someone might appear and rescue her from this moment. No one did. The quiet street held its breath. My son tugged my sleeve. "Dad, can we go home?" His voice cracked, reminding me why this mattered. Why I couldn't let the enforcer in crimson twist this into an accusation against him. So I scooped him up, cradling him against my chest. Even then, a faint tremor ran through his body. "We're done here," I said, turning toward our house. We'll file our own report." "You don't have the authority," the tyrant in heels began. Elise cut her off. "We have plenty." We walked away, but the officer of rules wasn't finished. Her heels clicked sharply against the asphalt as she followed us across the cul-de-sac. "Failure to sign the acknowledgement will escalate the violation," she warned, "and refusal to comply with an HOA request is grounds for further disciplinary measures." I stopped at the base of my porch steps and slowly turned back to her. "You're threatening a family whose child was injured, and you're doing it while standing on a lane that still has paint flecks from where he slid after impact." The clipboard queen's gaze flicked downward, just for a heartbeat, but I saw it. She didn't expect anyone to remember the color of trauma. Elise brushed past me, stepping onto the porch with a protective tension in her shoulders. "Rowan," she murmured, "bring him in. I'll grab the first aid kit." Inside, the cool air of our living room felt unreal compared to the heat of confrontation outside. I lowered my son onto the couch, scanning his. Knees, elbows, palms, every place that had slammed pavement. He'd heal physically, but the fear, that sticks. Elise met my eyes as she cleaned his scrapes. "She knows the footage was altered," she whispered. "That's why she followed us. She's desperate." "And dangerous," I murmured back. Through the window blinds, I spotted the board chair still standing in our driveway, arms folded, phone in hand. That was her strength, intimidation from a distance. She thrived on making residents feel watched, cornered, regulated. "She's calling someone," I said. "Let her," Elise replied. "Because if the footage was tampered with, there's a digital fingerprint somewhere, and you're the one person who can find it." Her words hit me harder than she intended. I'd spent years auditing government data systems, training agencies how to detect manipulation, reconstruct timelines, and spot alterations invisible to the average eye. I'd always kept that part of myself quiet in this neighborhood. People didn't like knowing their neighbor could reverse engineer truth from corrupted files. But now, that silence cost too much. My son reached for my hand. "Is she mad at us?" "No," I told him gently. "She's scared of what happens when the truth shows up." Behind us, Elise's keyboard clicked as she opened her laptop. The HOA portal logs device access. If Brielle, or anyone she pressured, touched the footage, it'll show. "She'll never admit it," I said. "She won't have to," Elise answered. Outside, the enforcer in crimson finally turned and marched away, her silhouette stiff with anger. But something in the way she moved, too quick, too sharp, told me she understood what came next. This wasn't a dispute anymore. It was an unraveling. Officer Dana Whitaker arrived before the ice pack on my son's knee had even begun to melt. I saw her patrol SUV slow in front of our house, hesitation flickering through the tinted glass before she stepped out. She wasn't here for a wellness check. That much was obvious. She moved like someone caught between duty and danger, and the moment her boots hit the pavement, her eyes shot toward Brielle Kavanaugh storming away at the far end of the lane. The board chair didn't acknowledge her. She didn't have to. Her rigid shoulders spoke for her, furious, rattled, threatened. The enforcer in crimson rarely exposed her emotions publicly, but today she couldn't hide the crack in her armor. Whitaker paused beside the yellow lane marker, staring at it for a moment too long. Her jaw tightened. I'd seen that expression before, someone piecing together a truth they weren't supposed to touch. She finally approached my porch, but her steps were slow, measured, careful. "Rowan, Elise," she said quietly. "I got a call about a safety dispute." "A call," Elise repeated, arms folded. "Not a report." Whitaker's eyes flicked again toward the direction the clipboard queen had disappeared. "Correct." I gestured for her to come inside. She didn't move. Instead, her gaze drifted to my son sitting on the couch behind me, holding the cold pack to his knee, trying to act braver than he felt. That was when I saw the conflict hit her full force. Her shoulders dropped just a fraction, her breathing shifted, and her voice, usually crisp, authoritative, softened around the edges. "Is he hurt?" she asked. "A few scrapes," I said, "but it could have been worse." "He was struck by a bike," Elise added. "Full speed, and Brielle filed a notice against him." Whitaker flinched, small but real. Her hands tightened around the notepad she wasn't writing on. She looked at the lane marker again, then back at my son, and the pull inside her was unmistakable. Loyalty to the HOA contract on one side, her conscience on the other. "I need to hear what happened," she murmured, but her voice lacked the firmness of procedure. This wasn't protocol. This was a woman wrestling with what she already suspected. I walked her through the collision, my son's fall, the way the tyrant in heels stood over him, lecturing instead of helping, how the officer of rules followed us onto our porch, threatening fines while my child trembled. Whitaker listened, but halfway through, her brows pinched together, empathy pushing through professional restraint. "Did she really refuse assistance for him?" she asked quietly. "She never even asked," Elise said. Another tightening in Whitaker's jaw. She wasn't hiding her reaction well anymore. But the moment that broke her internal divide came when Elise said, "The footage is missing frames." Whitaker's head snapped toward her, not gradually, instantly. "Missing?" she repeated, as in, deleted? Elise nodded. 3 frames, enough to hide the angle of impact. Whitaker exhaled a slow, heavy breath, her fingers pressing against the bridge of her nose. It wasn't frustration. It was fear. Fear of what that meant. Fear of the lines being crossed behind closed HOA doors. Fear of what she'd be forced to do if she acknowledged it. "Brielle didn't mention that," she said tightly. "She wouldn't," I replied. "She's already rewriting the story." The conflicted witness stared at me, and for a moment, she wasn't an officer. She was someone realizing she'd been used by the clipboard queen, used by a system that relied on her silence to maintain power. I can't. She stopped, rubbing the back of her neck. "If she tampered with evidence, that's a crime," Elise finished. Whitaker swallowed hard. She wasn't supposed to agree, not out loud, but her eyes said everything. "Rowan," she said finally, voice low, "send me a copy of whatever you find, quietly. Don't put it in any official channel yet." She paused, glancing around like the street itself might. "Be listening. And be careful. If she feels cornered, she'll escalate fast." The enforcer in crimson was still nowhere in sight, but her presence lingered like a storm cloud stretched thin over our street. Whitaker stepped back toward her SUV, but she hesitated again, her internal war still raging. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "your son didn't do anything wrong." She drove away with that conflict still etched across her face, and I knew then that she'd just become part of this fight, whether she wanted to or not. By the next morning, the HOA portal lit up with new notifications. 3 of them, all stamped with the same signature, Brielle Kavanaugh. The timing wasn't subtle. She'd waited until dawn, when most residents were still sipping coffee or packing lunches, and pushed the violations through like she was firing warning shots. Failure to comply, failure to acknowledge, child safety infraction, escalated. Elise stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. She moved fast. "She's scared," I said. "This is how she regains control." The board chair didn't just escalate. She launched an assault. Each notice was layered with citations, subclauses, and penalties written in the kind of language meant to overwhelm a resident into surrendering. But fear wasn't going to work on us, not after what she'd done. Movement outside the window caught my eye. The enforcer in crimson was already striding down the sidewalk, clipboard tucked under her arm, her tailored jacket slicing through the morning air like she was cutting her path through enemy territory. The clipboard queen wasn't even trying to hide the fact that she'd come to force compliance in person. "Stay inside with him," I told Elise. She grabbed my wrist. "Rowan, don't let her provoke you." "I won't," I promised, though every part of me was ready for a fight. I stepped outside just as the tyrant in heels reached my driveway. Her expression was set, composed, severe, eyes glittering with something sharper than determination. "We need to talk," she said. No greeting, no courtesy. "We really don't," I replied. "Your notices speak for themselves." "Then let me clarify them," she said, lifting the clipboard. "Your refusal to sign the incident acknowledgement means you are now in violation of Section 4A, subsection—" "Stop," I cut in. "You submitted altered footage." Her eyes flashed, but she didn't blink. "That accusation is unfounded." "It's documented," I said, "and you know it." Her throat moved, just a small swallow. But enough to tell me the officer of rules felt the pressure rising. She pivoted, shifting her weight like she was recalibrating her strategy. "Regardless of your personal interpretation of events, HOA protocol requires resident cooperation." If you continue resisting, the board will initiate formal penalties, including suspension of VAU, privileges, and mandatory hearings. She thought I'd fold under bureaucracy. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I know what you're trying to do. You're burying the truth under paperwork. I'm enforcing policy, she snapped. You're manipulating it. The sidewalk seemed to tighten around us, every house quiet, blinds half open, neighbors pretending not to watch, but they always watched Brielle when she was on the warpath. The clipboard queen thrived on that attention. It made her feel untouchable. But this time, she didn't see the cracks forming. Return your son's bicycle to the designated storage area within 24 hours, she continued, and ensure he does not enter bike travel lanes without direct adult supervision. My jaw locked. He wasn't even moving when he was hit. That interpretation differs from the footage. There are missing frames, Brielle. She exhaled sharply, annoyance slipping through her mask. Mr. Maddox, if you continue accusing board leadership of misconduct, I'll be required to escalate this to a disciplinary review. You already did, I said, stepping past her toward the lane marker. But you made one mistake. She stiffened. And what mistake is that? You assumed you were the only one who understood how digital logs work. Her facade faltered. Even if she didn't respond, the tension in her posture betrayed her. The enforcer in crimson hated losing control, especially when the loss wasn't theatrical, but technical. Before she could regroup, a voice called out from down the street. Everything all right here? A neighbor, the first witness of the day. Brielle instantly switched tones, posture softening into practiced authority. Just a routine compliance check. I faced him. My son was hit by a bike. We're addressing the fallout. The neighbor's gaze slid toward the clipboard queen, then to me, then to the lane marker, still chipped from yesterday. And for the first time, I sensed doubt drifting across the community. Brielle saw it too. Her smile tightened. I'll return with formal documentation, she said, stepping back. Expect it by noon. The officer of rules turned sharply and marched away, her heels striking the pavement like a metronome of irritation. I watched her retreat, the morning sun casting her shadow long across the lane she claimed to protect. She wasn't just escalating, she was cornering herself, and she didn't even see it yet. By noon, the HOA portal updated again, this time with something new. A formal evidence log summary, uploaded by Brielle Kavanaugh herself. Elise and I exchanged a look before opening it, bracing for whatever the board chair believed would tighten her grip on this situation. The file contained timestamps, device IDs, and a short written summary of the collision. It looked official, polished, authoritative, exactly the kind of document the enforcer in. Crimson used to intimidate residents who didn't know better. But Elise leaned closer, scrolling with narrowed eyes. There, she said softly. That doesn't belong. A flicker in one of the log strings, barely noticeable unless you understood how camera servers stitched sequential files together. The clipboard queen must have thought the formatting looked harmless. To most people, it would have. But to us, it was a flare in the dark. She exported a merged version, Elise murmured, and whoever did it tried to hide the splice. Not tried, I corrected. Failed. This was it. The discovery moment, the exact point where my professional skills turned from quiet background to active weapon. My experience auditing federal surveillance systems wasn't theoretical. I'd spent years tracing digital manipulation through layers far more complex than a community HOA camera feed. She never expected anyone in this neighborhood to know how to read raw metadata, Elise said. She definitely didn't expect two people. Before diving deeper, I checked the street. The tyrant in heels was out again. She moved briskly from house to house, dropping envelopes into mail slots, escalation notices no doubt, her steps clipped with the tension of someone who felt their authority slipping grain by grain. She's trying to overwhelm us, Elise said. She's trying to stay ahead of the truth, I replied. I pulled my laptop closer and opened a forensic time sequence tool I usually reserve for government audits. As the log summary loaded, more inconsistencies surfaced, jumps in lighting averages between frames, unmatched shadow angles, bit depth fluctuations. The officer of rules had underestimated the technology she weaponized. She removed the exact frame showing Connor's impact angle, I said. The deletion breaks the exposure continuity. And exposure continuity, Elise whispered, cannot be faked. A slow exhale left my chest. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was evidence. Real, technical, verifiable evidence. Footsteps outside broke the quiet. I looked through the blinds. Officer Dana Whitaker. She wasn't approaching like yesterday, not cautiously, not conflicted. Today she walked with urgency, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the houses like she felt a pressure closing in on her. I stepped outside before she knocked. "Everything all right?" "No," she said, voice low. "Something's happening." She handed me a paper, one of the envelopes Brielle had been distributing. "Residents are receiving notices encouraging them to submit statements about your son's unsafe conduct." My jaw clenched. Elise appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder. Whitaker continued. "Residents are calling me. They're confused. Some are angry. They don't understand why they're being asked to sign things they didn't witness." The clipboard queen was manufacturing consensus, trying to create a story she could fall back on. Whitaker glanced around again, then leaned in. "I need to know, is there actually something wrong with the footage?" "Yes," Elise answered without hesitation. 3 missing frames and a splice. Whitaker shut her eyes briefly. Guilt, realization, fear. If that's true, she's not just breaking HOA rules. She's manipulating evidence connected to an injury. "She knows," I said. "That's why she's pushing residents to back her version." The conflicted witness looked down at her hands. "I should have stopped this earlier. I saw her pull the footage before it was approved for release. She said she needed to review it for clarity. I didn't question it. There it was. The internal fracture finally splitting open. "You're questioning it now," I said gently. She nodded, but the worry didn't leave her face. "If she finds out I'm talking to you, she'll accuse me of interfering. She's already upset I didn't take her statement yesterday as fact." "She's scared of what we'll uncover," Elise said. "No," Whitaker whispered. "She's scared of what you already have." Behind her, the enforcer in crimson appeared at the far end of the lane again, walking with the sharp, rigid pace of someone who sensed betrayal in the air. Whitaker stepped back. "Whatever you do next, be prepared. She won't stop escalating." She left quickly, tension shadowing her path. Elise turned to me. "We have what we need. Now we build the case." I looked down at the glowing metadata on my screen. Every inconsistency another thread pulling Brielle's story apart. The unraveling had begun. And this time, it was technical. Exactly where I was strongest. The moment Whitaker's SUV disappeared around the corner, I closed the blinds halfway. Not enough to hide us, but enough to watch without being watched. Elise settled beside me with her laptop, reopening the metadata logs. Every line of code, every timestamp anomaly, every exposure inconsistency tightened the noose around Brielle Kavanaugh's version of events. "This splice was done manually," I said. "Not by automation." Elise nodded, "which means someone accessed the system directly." "And there are only 3 users with that level of access," I added, scrolling. "The board chair, the designated IT vendor, and the emergency override credential." Her breath stilled. "Brielle has the override code." Of course she did. The enforcer in crimson collected authority like trophies. Every password, every rulebook clause, every shred of power she could convert into leverage. But she'd finally stepped into a realm where authority meant nothing. Digital footprints were apolitical. Technical truth didn't bend to fear or hierarchy. Before I could run another analysis, sharp footsteps echoed outside. I looked through the blinds again. The clipboard queen was heading straight toward our porch. Her stride was fast, rigid, each step a punctuation mark of rising panic. Papers were tucked under her arm, and her jaw carried the tension of someone prepared to unleash consequences. "Rowan," Elise whispered. "She's coming. I see her." I opened the door before the tyrant in heels could knock. I didn't want her pounding on the frame like she owned it. She didn't wait for a greeting. "We need to discuss the spread of false information," she said sharply. "Certain residents are under the impression that you're accusing the board of misconduct." "No impression," I said. "I am." Her nostrils flared. "Then let me be clear. Distributing defamatory claims will result in legal action." I stepped onto the porch, closing the distance between us. "And deleting digital evidence will result in criminal action." For the first time, the officer of rules faltered. A flicker, barely visible, but unmistakable. Her fingers tightened around her paperwork, and one corner trembled. "I don't know what you think you found," she began. "You removed frames," I said. "You altered the exposure profile, and you used your override credential to access restricted logs." Her silence was louder than her protests. Behind me, Elise stepped into the doorway. "And you filed new notices without waiting for a police statement. That alone violates HOA compliance procedure." Brielle turned sharply. "Your interpretation of—" "No," Elise said. "Protocol, not interpretation." The clipboard queen straightened her spine, trying to reclaim her composure. "If you have concerns, you may submit them in writing to the board, and we will address them appropriately." I laughed once, short, humorless. "You mean bury them?" She stiffened again. Her eyes flicked toward the neighborhood, toward the windows partly open, blinds tilted, shadows moving. Residents were watching. They always watched when she patrolled with that rigid authority. But today, for the first time, she wasn't controlling the narrative. "You're escalating this unnecessarily," she said. "You're creating tension where none existed." "You hit a child," I replied. "Then you rewrote the story. That tension came from you." Her expression hardened. "My son's account differs." "Your son's account is irrelevant when the video contradicts it." A pause, a long, sharp inhale. Then, unexpectedly, her voice dropped to a low, almost pleading register. "You're making a mistake, Rowan. You don't understand the implications of challenging board authority. Once you cross that line—" She didn't finish. Maybe she couldn't, but I knew what she meant. Fear, intimidation, consequences inflicted quietly. Elise stepped closer. "The only line that matters is the truth." Brielle's jaw clenched. "This isn't over." "No," I said. "It isn't." She pivoted so sharply her heel, scraped the concrete. The enforcer in crimson strode back toward the lane, but something was different now. Her walk wasn't the confident march she used to dominate a cul-de-sac. It was too fast, too rigid, too brittle, because she knew. She knew we had evidence. She knew Whitaker was wavering. She knew her fabricated narrative was crumbling. As her silhouette disappeared behind the hedges, Elise turned to me. "This is bigger than us now." I nodded. "It's time to formalize the findings." We moved back inside, the weight of what came next settling like a storm front rolling in. This wasn't about a collision anymore. This was about exposing a truth she'd fought desperately to bury. And we were just getting started. I had just finished exporting the corrupted sequence into a secure folder when a soft knock landed on our front door. Too tentative to be a neighbor, too cautious to be a solicitor. Elise looked at me, brows tightening. We both knew that knock didn't belong to Brielle Kavanaugh. The board chair never approached anything gently. I opened the door to find Officer Dana Whitaker, standing in the shade of our porch, her uniform crisp, but her expression unraveling at the edges. She scanned the street before stepping inside, as if expecting the enforcer in crimson to appear around the corner with another clipboard full of consequences. "Close it," she whispered. I did. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, like she'd been wrestling with the decision to come here all afternoon. Her internal conflict wasn't subtle today. It sat in her shoulders, her eyes, the tight way she clasped her hands. She wasn't just on edge. She was scared, not of us, of the clipboard queen. "Something happened," she finally said. "Something you both need to know." Elise motioned her toward the dining table. "Sit. Tell us." Whitaker didn't sit. She paced once, pressing her palms against her hips before blurting. "Brielle filed an internal statement with the HOA board claiming that you," she pointed at me, "threatened her during your conversation this morning." Elise's jaw dropped. "Threatened her? Rowan never—" "I know," Whitaker said quickly. "I told her I didn't witness anything like that. And she got angry, really angry. That's why I came here." The tyrant in heels was cornered, and she was striking out in every direction she could. "What exactly did she claim?" I asked. Whitaker swallowed. "That you warned her you'd destroy the board if she didn't retract the violation." Elise laughed once under her breath. "That sounds like projection." Whitaker didn't smile. "The problem is, she wants to push this into a formal complaint. She's already contacting committee members to gain support." "She's building a case before the truth lands," I said. "Exactly," Whitaker replied. She stopped pacing and looked at me. "You need to understand something. Once she initiates a formal misconduct allegation, even if it's unfounded, it shifts the focus to you. People stop looking at the evidence and start looking at the accusation. I felt heat rush to my chest, not anger, clarity. This was the officer of rules at her worst, weaponizing procedure to mask wrongdoing. Elise rounded the table, voice steady. Dana, why are you telling us this? You could have stayed neutral. That's the problem, she whispered. Neutrality is no longer an option. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and set it on the table. I wrote down every time she accessed the footage before releasing it. I didn't file these notes officially, but I kept them. Elise's eyes widened. You have timestamps? Whitaker nodded. My heart kicked once, hard. The clipboard queen's entire narrative depended on no one tracking her unauthorized access trail. Dana, I said softly, these notes could prove she manipulated the footage. I know, she answered, and that's why you need them. But listen. Her voice lowered. You didn't get these from me. I was never here. If she finds out I'm helping you, she'll take my badge to the chief and claim I'm interfering. Her fear wasn't hypothetical. The clipboard queen was notorious for weaponizing influence inside community channels. Threatening a police liaison wasn't beneath her. It was practically expected. Elise placed a hand over Whitaker's. We'll protect you. You're doing the right thing. Tears pooled along Whitaker's lashes, but she blinked them back. I just want the truth, and I can't watch her do this anymore. The enforcer in crimson had pushed her too far. Dana, I said, these notes, combined with the metadata we found, create a complete timeline. She won't be able to deny what she did. Whitaker glanced at the window, nerves sparking again. Then move fast, because she's escalating, and she's not acting alone. I overheard her talking to another board officer. She's trying to get them to sign off on a disciplinary hearing for you. My blood chilled. A disciplinary hearing meant she planned to flip this entire situation onto us, publicly. And Rowan, Whitaker added, voice tightening, once she sets a date, she'll spin the narrative to every household before you get a chance to speak. Of course she would. That was her real power, not policy. Control. The clipboard queen's footsteps weren't just echoing across the neighborhood anymore. They were coming straight for us. Whitaker stepped back, gripping the doorknob. Use what I gave you. Prove what she did, and do it before she silences you. She slipped out the door like a woman fleeing a battlefield she'd been trapped in too long. As it closed behind her, Elise looked at me with a steadiness I needed. This is it, she said. We take her down with the truth. And we start now, I answered, opening the file tools on my laptop. Because the unraveling wasn't enough anymore. It was time to expose her. The moment Whitaker's notes hit the table, everything shifted. The fear that had hung around Elise and me for days hardened into clarity. We weren't reacting anymore. We were planning. And for the first time, Brielle Kavanaugh didn't feel like an inevitable force of authority. She felt like someone who'd finally made a mistake too big to bury. Elise spread out the handwritten timestamps, aligning them beside the metadata I'd extracted earlier. These match, she said, tapping the page. Here, this is the moment she accessed the footage before exporting it. I studied the code, the timing, the unusual gap. And here, this is the moment the frames disappeared. Side by side, the evidence formed a complete picture. The board chair had overwritten the official logs with her personal version, then used that manipulated footage to launch a campaign against an injured child. But what mattered most wasn't the crime, it was the pattern. This wasn't the enforcer in crimson acting under confusion or error. This was deliberate. She wanted to erase the truth before anyone else saw it, Elise murmured. And now we show everyone what she erased, I said. The clipboard queen had built her authority on confidence, intimidation disguised as competence. But technology didn't bend to reputation. Digital timelines didn't care about roles, heels, or HOA titles. And the tyrant in heels hadn't expected that the person she cornered was someone who spent years reconstructing truths from corrupted systems. I opened a program I hadn't used since my federal audit days, a timeline reconstruction suite. As the files processed, the visual sequence began rebuilding itself, fragments aligning into the closest version of the original. Elise leaned over my shoulder. She's going to lose her mind when she sees this. If we do it right, I said, she won't see it until it's too late. Elise smiled, tight, focused, determined. The fear she'd carried since the collision had sharpened into something else. Resolve. Before we could continue, a notification echoed from the HOA portal. I opened it, already knowing whose digital fingerprint would be stamped across the message. Notice, emergency board meeting, proposed filed by Brielle Kavanaugh. Of course, the officer of rules was already laying the groundwork. The meeting request accused me of creating a hostile environment, interfering with HOA operations, and attempting to intimidate board leadership. Elise read it and muttered, "She's trying to get ahead of the narrative." "No," I said, "she's trying to control it." The enforcer in crimson never fought fair. She fought first. But she wasn't the only one with initiative today. I exported the reconstructed sequence into a secure folder, then added Whitaker's handwritten timestamps, overlaying them into a visual audit trail. It wasn't just evidence, it was a technical story, one that exposed every lie, every deletion, every digital fingerprint Brielle left behind. Elise pressed her hand on my back. "Rowan, this is airtight." "It has to be," I said. "Once she calls that meeting, she'll spin this until the whole neighborhood believes we're the problem. Then we don't wait for the meeting," she said. "We take the truth to someone who can't ignore it." Officer Whitaker's face flashed in my memory, fear, regret, and the weight of someone who'd crossed a line she could never step back from. "We send this to Dana," I said, "but encrypted. If Brielle gets wind of it—" "She won't," Elise cut in. "I'll mask the sender. She'll think it came from a secure server. That was why we worked. I built the tools. She perfected the strategy. I attached the reconstructed sequence, the metadata, the timeline analysis, Whitaker's notes, and a summary we drafted together." Elise's fingers moved with precision as she cloaked the transmission route, then hit send. For a moment, the house felt still, silent, like we were standing at the edge of something massive. Then Elise whispered, "She has no idea what's coming." But the clipboard queen wasn't staying silent. A shadow moved across our window. Another footstep. Another envelope sliding into a neighbor's mailbox. I peeked out. There she was, Brielle Kavanaugh herself, walking the street with a storm in her posture, distributing whatever narrative she needed residents to believe. Her heels struck the pavement with that same commanding rhythm she used to project dominance. But today, something was different. She didn't look confident. She looked rushed, threatened, cornered. "She's speeding up," Elise said beside me. "She should," I replied, "because the truth is already moving faster than she can." Behind us, my laptop chimed. An encrypted reply from Whitaker. 3 words, I received it. The unraveling was almost complete, but the confrontation, that was still ahead. Whitaker's message, I received it, echoed through the room like a trigger being pulled. Elise and I exchanged a look that held equal parts relief and anticipation. The truth was no longer just in our hands. It was in the possession of someone who'd seen the inside of Brielle Kavanaugh's tactics up close, someone who understood exactly how far the board chair was willing to go. But that didn't mean the clipboard queen would slow down. If anything, she doubled her pace. By late afternoon, the HOA app lit up again with a fresh bulletin stamped under her name. Elise read it aloud, her voice flattening as she scrolled. "A mandatory safety compliance session will be held tomorrow evening. Attendance required. Residents encouraged to report disruptive behavior from households involved in recent incidents." I snorted quietly. She's building a crowd before the confrontation. "She's shaping the battlefield," Elise said. "That's what she does." The enforcer in crimson didn't lead with facts. She led with fear. Subtle nudges, loaded phrases, careful implication. She wasn't just a tyrant in heels. She was a strategist who built her dominance by controlling what people thought they saw. But this time, the narrative wouldn't belong to her. I reopened the reconstruction software and began preparing the presentation for the public meeting. Not dramatic, not emotional, just precise. Once the timeline played out on a screen in front of a room full of residents, even the officer of rules wouldn't be able to twist her way out. "Let's map it chronologically," Elise said, pulling up the missing frames on her laptop. "Start with the untouched timestamps, then overlay the discrepancies." "Already doing it," I murmured, adjusting exposure variance graphs. What we were building wasn't just a rebuttal, it was irrefutable, a blueprint of her manipulation. A quiet thud outside broke my concentration. I looked toward the window and froze. Brielle Kavanaugh stood at our mailbox, not walking past, not delivering notices, standing, staring at our house like she was trying to see through the walls. Elise's breath caught. Oh my God, Rowan! The board chair opened the mailbox with the controlled precision of someone who needed to prove something to herself. She slid in an envelope, thicker than the others she'd delivered earlier, then hesitated before closing the lid. Her fingers stayed there too long, knuckles whitening. This wasn't confidence. This was panic wrapped in performance. The clipboard queen turned and walked away with a stiffness that made my pulse spike. Something in her cadence had changed, slower, heavier, like her certainty was unraveling thread by thread. Elise opened the front door before I could stop her. "Brielle!" she called. The tyrant in heels paused but didn't turn around. "Whatever you're trying to do," Elise said, voice echoing down the lane, "it won't work." Finally, the enforcer in crimson rotated just enough that her profile caught the light. "You're mistaken," she said. "Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." Then she walked off, each step sharper than the last. Back inside, Elise cautiously retrieved the envelope from the mailbox and brought it to the table. We opened it together. Inside was a printed summons. A disciplinary hearing. Tomorrow. Against me. Filed under resident threatening conduct, attempted manipulation of official records, interference with board authority. Elise let out a humorless laugh. She knows we sent the evidence to Dana. She's trying to flip the timeline, I said. If she accuses me first, she thinks anything we present will look retaliatory. The officer of rules wasn't stupid. She understood optics better than anyone in this neighborhood, but she'd miscalculated something big. This gives us exactly what we needed, I said. Elise frowned. How? She created a public forum, I answered. A setting where the evidence can't be dismissed or hidden. A hearing means we get to speak, present, document, and enter everything into the official HOA record. Realization hit her eyes. And once it's in the record, she can't erase it, I finished. Elise leaned back, adrenaline and purpose overtaking fear. Then we prepare the presentation tonight. We'll structure it clean, professional, impossible to refute. And we include Dana's timestamps? She asked. Yes, I said. But only in the final reveal. She's already risking too much. We worked for hours, coding, aligning, cross-referencing. Every inconsistency told a story. Every missing frame became another nail in the board chair's coffin. By the time we finished, the reconstructed timeline was a blade sharper than anything she'd ever wielded, and tomorrow she'd walk straight into it. I shut my laptop with a soft click. This ends at the hearing, I said. Elise nodded. It ends with the truth. Outside, I saw the faint silhouette of the clipboard queen disappearing between porch lights, still trying to rally a neighborhood she was about to lose. Because tomorrow, the narrative wouldn't belong to her. It would belong to the evidence. The morning of the hearing felt like the air itself had thickened. Even before sunrise, Ridgewood Crest carried a strange hum, a quiet tension threading through hedges, porches, and mailboxes. Elise and I stood in our living room, reviewing the final sequence again, the reconstructed footage looping with flawless precision, every missing frame, every log entry, every deceptive move Brielle Kavanaugh made. This is ready, Elise said, sliding her thumb across the touchpad. She won't escape this. I nodded, but my pulse stayed tight. The board chair didn't go down quietly. The clipboard queen didn't surrender. The enforcer in crimson fought with reputation, intimidation, and carefully curated power. Today she would walk into that meeting, wearing authority like armor, hoping nobody noticed the cracks beneath it. We arrived at the community center 10 minutes early, and even then, several residents were already gathered outside, whispering, glancing, pretending not to stare. A few nodded at us sympathetically, others shifted their weight, uncomfortable with uncertainty. Then she appeared. Brielle Kavanaugh, stepping out of her SUV as if she were descending a courthouse staircase. Chin lifted, blazer immaculate, eyes sharp enough to slice through stone. The tyrant in heels approached the entrance with a posture that made the air tighten. In her hand was a thick binder of printed statements, sealed envelopes, and policies. Her shield, her sword, her entire strategy wrapped in paper. Elise murmured, she brought ammunition. She won't get to fire it, I said. As we walked inside, I saw Officer Dana Whitaker already seated near the back. She didn't look at Brielle. Instead, she gave me the slightest nod, confirmation that she'd come prepared, that she had our evidence secured in case something went wrong. But the fear was there, buried beneath her professionalism. She knew what this meant. She knew the officer of rules would retaliate if she sensed betrayal. The meeting room buzzed as board members took their seats at a long table. The enforcer in crimson stood at the center, hands resting on her binder. When she opened the session, her tone was smooth, controlled, rehearsed. Residents of Ridgewood Crest, thank you for attending this urgent disciplinary hearing. We are here to address concerns regarding Mr. Rowan Maddox's conduct and his interference with official HOA procedures. Elise stiffened beside me. The clipboard queen continued, I have provided detailed documentation showing a pattern of aggression, misinformation, and refusal to adhere to safety regulations. She paused dramatically, letting the room absorb her narrative. A few residents nodded uncertainly. Then she turned her gaze to me, cold, triumphant. Mr. Maddox, you will have the opportunity to respond after the board reviews the presented evidence. I stepped forward before she could continue. Actually, the order of evidence matters, and what I have needs to come first. The room shifted. Brielle's expression tightened, a tiny flicker of panic beneath the surface. That is not the procedure. It is when digital evidence has been tampered with, I said calmly. And when that evidence concerns the injury of a child. A ripple spread across the seats. Elise connected my laptop to the projector. The screen illuminated, filling the room with the reconstructed timeline. The first frame appeared, unaltered, clear, timestamp visible. This is the original exposure pattern from the HOA camera server, I said. And these, I clicked, are the missing frames that should have been here. Gasps scattered through the crowd. I continued. The deletion occurred after an unauthorized login. The override credential used belongs to one person. I let the silence stretch. That access, I said, was initiated under Brielle Kavanaugh's login. The clipboard queen lurched to her feet. That is a fabrication. No, I interrupted, clicking to the next segment. This is the system's hash verification. And this is the splice point where your edited footage was exported. Murmurs rose. A board member leaned forward, eyes widening. Another whispered, That's impossible. But it wasn't. It was undeniable. Elise stepped forward. We also have documented timestamps showing every moment she accessed the footage before release, provided by your own police liaison. Whitaker's breath caught, but she didn't look away. The tyrant in heels slammed her binder shut. This is an ambush. These files could be manipulated. Elise and I reconstructed them independently, I said, and the metadata matches. The room fully turned now, not toward her authority, but toward her accountability. The enforcer in Crimson's composure cracked. Her voice shook with restrained fury. This is an attack on the board, on me. No, I said softly. This is the truth you tried to erase. The hearing room fell silent, the weight of the evidence settling like a stone dropped into deep water. And for the first time since this began, the clipboard queen had no script left to hide behind. The room didn't just fall silent, it tilted. Residents leaned forward, board members stiffened, and even the fluorescent lights above seemed to hum differently as the truth settled over everyone. For the first time all evening, Brielle Kavanaugh didn't look like the woman who controlled this community. She looked like someone who just watched her carefully built facade crack in front of an entire neighborhood. What you're implying is outrageous, she said, voice sharp enough to cut through the air. But it wasn't confidence. It was desperation wrapped in authority. A board member cleared his throat. Brielle, is this true? The metadata is fabricated, the clipboard queen snapped. None of this reflects official records. I stepped forward. Then let's discuss the official records. I clicked to the next slide. Whitaker's handwritten timestamps matched with the server's access history. These entries show the exact minute she accessed the footage before it was reviewed, authenticated, or approved. A whisper rippled through the audience. The enforcer in crimson glared at Officer Whitaker with a look that could have shattered glass. You had no authorization to turn over any internal notes. Whitaker rose slowly, palms resting on the back of the chair in front of her. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the resolve of someone who'd finally chosen a side. They weren't internal notes, she said. They were my personal observations, and I gave them because I saw a child hurt and a family being blamed. Gasps, real ones. Brielle's expression tightened like a vice. You're compromising your professional position? No, Whitaker said, interrupting her for the first time. You compromised this community when you altered evidence. The tyrant in heels inhaled sharply, almost choking on her disbelief. Elise stepped beside me. These are the 3 missing frames, she said, clicking again. The projected footage flickered, Connor barreling downhill, my son standing still on the faded yellow lane marker, the collision unmistakable when reconstructed. This isn't just about the accident, Elise continued. This is about the narrative she manipulated afterward. A resident in the second row raised her hand. Brielle, why would you erase footage that showed what happened? Another resident spoke before Brielle could answer. My son said you pressured him to write a statement last night. He didn't even see the accident. A third resident joined in. We're tired of your intimidation tactics. The officer of rules tried to command the room with a raised hand, but no one stopped. Her grip on authority had slipped, and everyone could see it now. This meeting is spiraling out of procedural bounds, she said. The board will reconvene privately. No, a board member said firmly. This needs to finish here, publicly. Brielle turned on him. You don't have the authority to... And you don't have the authority to delete evidence, another board member countered. The clipboard queen's face flushed a shade darker, fury rising beneath the surface like a crackling storm. You have no idea what you're doing, she hissed. If you undermine me, you undermine the structural integrity of this entire HOA. No, I said quietly. We restore it. I clicked to the final slide, a side-by-side comparison of the unaltered metadata and her manipulated version. This is conclusive. These timelines don't lie. Brielle's breath hitched. It was the smallest sound, but it carried the weight of a collapsing empire. A board member stood. Effective immediately, we're suspending your authority pending a full external investigation. The enforcer in crimson spun toward him. You can't do this. Another board member rose. We just did. The audience murmured, some shocked, some relieved, some angry. They'd been led by someone who abused power so recklessly. Brielle's gaze landed on me once more. Pure venom, pure disbelief. You think this is over? It is, I said. Because the truth finally spoke louder than you. Her jaw quivered, not with fear. Her pride was breaking. The clipboard queen grabbed her binder with shaking hands, clutching it like a lifeline she'd already lost. As she stormed down the aisle, the community parted, not out of respect, but out of realization. She wasn't the leader she pretended to be. She was the reason this hearing existed. Whitaker exhaled shakily behind me. Elise took my hand. The tyrant in heels reached the doorway, paused for one last glare, then stepped out into the night. And just like that, the spell she'd held over Ridgewood Crest finally shattered. The room stayed frozen long after Brielle Kavanaugh disappeared into the hallway. No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been waiting years for the clipboard queen's grip on this place to finally loosen. Elise squeezed my hand once before letting go, stepping forward to disconnect the projector while the board murmured among themselves. A resident approached me first, an older man with silver hair and the kind of steady gaze you don't forget. Your boy didn't deserve any of this, he said. None of you did. Thank you, I replied, a knot forming in my throat. Behind him, a cluster of parents spoke quietly, their voices rising in a mixture of regret and anger. Regret that they'd ever believed the board chair's rigid narratives. Anger that she'd used fear as a governing tool. The enforcer in crimson hadn't just abused policy. She'd weaponized trust. Whitaker stepped closer, still pale, but no longer trembling. I sent everything to my supervisor, she whispered. They're opening a formal review. Once an external investigator sees the logs you reconstructed, well, let's just say the officer of rules will be answering to someone much higher than this HOA. You did the right thing, Elise told her gently. Whitaker swallowed. I hope so. Because when she looked at me just now, Rowan, she knows I helped you. She won't have the power to retaliate anymore, I said. Not after tonight. But the truth was, the tyrant in heels had lost her position long before this hearing. She lost it the moment she tampered with the footage. She just didn't realize her downfall had begun the minute she underestimated who she was dealing with. As residents trickled out into the crisp night air, the board called me over. The acting chair, one of the quieter members who rarely spoke during meetings, stood with the others beside him. "Mr. Maddox," he said, "on behalf of the board, we want to apologize for what your family went through. This was an abuse of power, and it won't be ignored." Elise joined me, standing tall and steady. The board chair, no, former board chair, had left a mess behind her, but the shift in the room was unmistakable. The neighborhood wasn't afraid anymore. Another board member asked, "Would you consider advising us as we review our digital systems? It's clear we need better oversight." I nodded slowly. "I'll help, but only if transparency becomes standard from now on." "It will," he promised. We left the building with residents still gathered outside, some patting my shoulder, others thanking Elise for uncovering what they never would have noticed. Our son, who'd stayed with a neighbor during the hearing, ran toward us the second we reached the street. Elise lifted him into her arms, and I felt something inside me finally unclench. We were safe, and more importantly, he was safe. But as we walked home, I noticed a figure standing near the stop sign at the end of the block, shoulders tight, arms crossed, eyes fixed on us. Brielle Kavanaugh. Even stripped of her authority, the clipboard queen still clung to the remnants of her identity like shards of a crown she once wore. Her posture wasn't confident anymore. It was brittle, trembling with disbelief. The enforcer in Crimson had built her entire world on compliance and control, and tonight, both had slipped straight through her fingers. She didn't speak when we approached, didn't shout, didn't threaten. She just stared, breathing hard, like she was piecing together how everything had unraveled so quickly. "You shouldn't be here," Elise said calmly. Brielle's jaw twitched. "This neighborhood will fall apart without structure." "No," I said softly. "It will finally breathe." Her eyes burned with something between anger and grief, as if losing power felt like losing identity itself. The officer of rules turned away before either of us could say another word and disappeared into the darkness, her footsteps uneven, her legacy shattered. When we reached our porch, Elise set our son down, and he ran inside. I paused at the threshold, glancing back one last time at the lane marker that had started all of this. The faded yellow paint. The place where a lie was born, and where the truth reclaimed it. This fight hadn't been about an HOA. It had been about protecting a child, about refusing to let fear dictate justice, about showing a community that truth doesn't bend for anyone, not even those in heels. I stepped inside, closing the door gently behind us. And to everyone who's ever stood up to power that tried to silence you, if you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because this wasn't just a victory, this was a reminder. Even the strongest walls crumble when the truth hits them.